about including caste as a protected class in our non-discrimination ordinance. And I began to explore whether it could fit under ancestry or race, which after doing more research, I didn't believe that it fit there. And after also the members sharing more with me about why it doesn't fit there. For those of you who don't know, caste is a complex type of discrimination that's based on intersecting identities, including political, economic, and social identities. It includes the color of your skin. It's intergenerational, and it's based on where you're born, who you marry, and many other factors. It's one of the oldest forms of social stratification. This is something that the British loved to really, they helped crystallize it, divide and conquer. They were great at really getting our country to fight each other. I also want to mention that this is something that is prevalent across South Asian countries, and it's across different religions. It's not just Hinduism, it's prevalent in Islam, in Sikhism, Jainism, Buddhism, Christianity. For example, if a Dalit were to convert from Hinduism to Islam, most likely they would still experience discrimination and oppression because of their caste. But the most important thing is that you guys help to highlight that this discrimination is happening here, right, among our communities here. And that is so important for us to take a stance on. Especially now heading into APIA Heritage Month, it's important that we as a community call out how we discriminate against each other, and perpetuate things like anti-Blackness. I also want to mention that Seattle has recently changed their non-discrimination ordinance, and the state of California has also proposed a bill. So these are they're discrimination cases that are being litigated. I will be bringing in the only other Asian American council member, my colleague Wood Song, into this as well. She'll be helping with this effort. And yeah, we are going to work with all of you and make this happen. So I want to thank you again for being here. Lynn, do you want to?
Sure. So just briefly jumping in, I was taking a look at what Seattle had put into place, and I found this quote that I think puts maybe a bit of context into what we do here at the Human Rights Commission and what we'd like to see happen in the city, from an organizer who said that if you marched in the Black Lives Matter movement, or you desire to live in a society free of racism, racial discrimination, sexism, or misogyny, then you should be paying attention, because while caste oppression or discrimination does not affect all Americans, the way it manifests itself is no different than other types of oppression under capitalism. That's an organizer named Sawant, and reflecting on the work in Seattle. And that ordinance update was voted in 6-1. So it sounds like it was something that the city council there really was supportive of, and something that the committee was demanding. So it's I think worthy of our time to put a little bit of research and time into talking to community members that we know. And hopefully we can have those reflections too as we look at this language, and hopefully we can anticipate more community members come forward to speak. Because I think the objective really is to not only just recognize this, but offer a way of assistance, right, through complaints, and that we have a process here that should apply to all protected classes that we seek try to help.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone have any questions, or I can go on?
I do.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a couple of questions. So I'm not against this at all, actually. I've heard of this before, and so I think this is something that it seems very simple to do. We just add it. My first question would be, do we have any idea how many people this affects or would affect within the city of Ann Arbor? And I suppose that's kind of hard because so many people come into the city to work, right? And it would be protections for people like me who don't necessarily own a home or something like within the city limits, but actually come into the city to work. The second question is, as I was listening to public comment, as a person, for example, if I'm hiring somebody, how would I know what caste somebody is in? I heard somebody mention a last name, but what other ways does somebody know what caste a person is in besides a last name?
That's a good question, and I think that you guys would be good to answer it. I want to address the first question though about, is it possible to quantify impact? Like how many people would be affected? This is something that manifests in Nepal, in Pakistan, Bhutan, Maldives. It's in a variety of countries. It's across a variety of religions. It's not just Hinduism. So I'm not sure how we would exactly quantify it.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you'd like to
Yeah,
jump in.
I can answer that. Typically, what happens is the first question will be like, are you vegetarian or non-vegetarian? First question.
Mm.
So if you are a non-veg, then they'll say, like, if you eat beef, then that kind of thing. Secondly, they'll ask, which village are you from? They'll find out which temple you go, because Indian temples are caste-based, so Indian streets, like there's we call it as village, cherry, or so everything is kind of like, even today, if I go to a village, I can't go to Agra, we call the Brahmin locality. I cannot go. I have to see my safety or any other caste. So it's all completely apartheid, completely discriminated. It's like a nation fighting with another nation. You won't believe it. So first thing, they'll ask different questions and they'll find out if you're from this street, even this area, they'll find it out. Same thing here.
Yes.
That's what they do that. It's a probing question.
Those are actually illegal employment questions.
Right,
You
right.
can't ask those in an interview.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother presentation. Okay, so,
The Asian American community is the largest racial ethnic minority in the city. So last I checked at the last census, it was 18%.
okay,
And there is a split, between, Asian Indians, Chinese Americans, Koreans. So there are very few Southeast Asians, but we are one of the
It is.
larger metropolitans in the state with one of the largest Asian American communities. So I think whatever statement we can make
It is.
on behalf of the community reflects, I think, an interest that the entire community has in making sure
I agree.
members are protected, especially in the face of, a lot of community members after, with the anti-Asian hate work and gun violence with Atlanta shootings, that people talk about, how hate works within our communities, either directed at us, between each other, from us to other communities. So this might be a good exercise to talk about harm, safety, history, identities, make us work a little bit harder to understand a pretty significant community here in the city, at the university, and the folks coming in from neighboring communities to work or go to school here.
I think it's really important to recognize too that someone who is uninitiated and uninformed and born in the United States without much contact with other cultures might not discriminate on the basis of caste, but would discriminate on the basis of national origin or race. But intra-group discrimination, where you are in fact being refused service or diminished in some way, wouldn't be recognized here because it wouldn't be based on national origin, and yet it's just as harmful. I mean, it is a comparison might be colorism among folks that are the descendants of slavery in America, right? Where the lighter you are, the straighter your hair, the more beautiful you'll be perceived as. And I do think it's important to capture all of these different ways in which, we diminish one another and make sure that we can hear in a formal way the problems. And I hope that we're going to form at least a little sub-community or group, because I'd like to hear more about what people's experiences have been. I mean, there is a lot of concern and fear around this. And so something must have triggered it,
Yeah.
So I would like to learn about that.
And I think, because we have this transient kind of community here, but we have a large immigrant community, it makes some of those cultural kind of traditions, that intra-group discrimination that happens, it's really happening here, you know what I mean? But it's interesting that you brought up colorism, because in looking into this, the attorneys let me know, the legal department, that we don't have ancestry currently in our non-discrimination.
Yes.
And, ancestry, you could attribute like tribal identity, you could attribute a whole host of ancestral identities to that, right? So this could also be an opportunity for us, beyond adding caste, to think more holistically about how inter-group discrimination of different cultures manifests here in the U.S. And how we protect people against it.
I'll just take a second here. When you said colorism, the whole thing started from there only. When you say varna means color. The varna means color, so you got it right.
Yeah, this is something that.
Varna means color, the four colors,
Colonialism
So
started horrible.
So yeah, that is something that's important to know, even though it's complex identity, it's really based in anti-blackness. And that is how people know what caste you belong to.
Yes.
I just want to add one more thing. I don't know how many council members know. There is one lawsuit here in the University of Michigan. There is one faculty member did the caste discrimination with another faculty member. And that did happen in 2010. You can Google it out, it is there now. So there is happened in our own city and we don't know. And people are not coming forward because they are worried about their job. They are worried about their family, what's going to happen, their kids and next generation, because if I disclose something may happen. So it's all fear we are having. So, but there is a lawsuit here in the city of Ann Arbor right now that is happened in 2010. One faculty member at the University of Michigan did that, yeah.
Letting us know. It might be worth us taking a look at what are big institutions doing. I know that Harvard amended their non-discrimination ordinance to include caste, and Michigan has. So in terms of next steps, I've suggested language from Marty. I want to go over it with Lynn. In terms of us writing a resolution with it, I think it's a good idea. This is a complex issue. So Lynn and I can start that, and we'll work with, the ANA members. I hope I'm saying that right, ANA members. And then also bring you all in. Does that sound like a good next step?
Well, is it possible to, maybe within the next 2 to 3 weeks, organize some sort of a listening session so that, we can really just sit and talk with folks and find out, what they're afraid of and what has been happening?
So specifically, like putting out a call to the community that if you've experienced caste
Just,
discrimination?
I've held them in libraries, in the downtown library. A gathering where we try to connect with, community groups.
I just wonder about anonymity, if folks are worried about, disclosing, or if they're in situations right now, if they're.
As with the undocumented community in general, we don't post signs and we don't set up notices. We ask community group members to chat among themselves, and normally, or in my experience, there are some safe spaces that the community identifies. So, for instance, there have been a couple of those meeting rooms in a trailer community right off of Michigan Avenue. I mean, locations like that, but to let and ask the community to tell us.
We're mobile. Yeah, I think that, I want to step back for a second. This issue can be highly politicized. And I do want to say that despite its origins, it's part of Indian culture and heritage, and it crosses religions. I want to say that. I also agree with Lynn that like a lot of these people could be in really sensitive positions and not want to come out. But I think what would be beneficial for us, and we've talked about this for a while, is just having an open forum at some point as the HRC on have you experienced discrimination, how do you follow up a report, instead of calling out caste, because then that could also help us get people who might talk about colorism or other forms of discrimination that might create an accession to this form.
If folks are uncomfortable in any kind of group setting, that's, of course, we'll honor that. I have found that oftentimes in the details and something triggers a change in a community, and if we're to identify other ways in which we might be helpful, that is how the idea emerged. Just talking with people about what was difficult in their lives and trying to come up with a universal that did not isolate one group from the other solution, right? Which I think our new non-discrimination ordinance and IDs carries now nicely to a closed circle, because now we're just talking about government issued IDs, right? Whatever, I don't mean to slow a process or cause anyone discomfort. I just want to be available if people want to talk about what's going on, so that we might see an opportunity and being, so it's okay. In terms of the process that you have outlined, I don't want to slow anything.
I think we will be focused on a resolution, and then as your guys' work as a committee in terms of. I'm sorry. I think, with mine and Lynn's role, and I forget my role now that I'm a CM liaison, we are really here to help turn our work kind of into policy, right? In terms of how this may inform your guys' community engagement or outreach work, I think that's a discussion that you guys should all have. And I also think it should be guided by the people most impacted. So, bringing some folks into these conversations when you think about doing a forum, a listening session, who've been affected, is a good idea.
It's relatively easy to put them into the protected class list. It's harder to make it meaningful. I want it to be meaningful.
Yes, Sarah.
Hi, thank you for everyone who spoke today. It's very moving, and for your work on this, Aisha. I had two questions. So the first one, I think, pertains to how do we make it meaningful? So I was curious about the definition that you came up with, and one thing that I noticed is that it doesn't, it sounds from this conversation that this is specific to South Asia and so forth, but it's not mentioned here. Was that intentional? Can you kind of talk to the implications of that? Are we sure that this definition is going to are we sure this definition is going to target what we think it's going to target?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. So let me read the definition out loud that we will help to come up with, and it has been shared with members of the group. Caste, so this will be added to the NDO on its own. Caste is a system of rigid social stratification characterized by hereditary status, race, or ancestry that restricts social status and creates social barriers, including restricting individuals' occupations, social interactions, and other privileges. I'm not saying that's the most perfect definition. I think that if we don't want to have a conversation about how it can be improved, especially, with groups like this informing the process, I think that's a good idea. I think we wanted to intentionally leave it open because yes, it may manifest in South Asian countries, but it may manifest in other countries, right? And we also don't want to put specifically, I remember thinking about this, if we put South Asian specifically, I don't want to limit someone else or someone interpreting that is, do I have to be an immigrant from there? I have, I'm second generation here, it's affecting me. That was my thinking of it. And let me also read Seattle's. Can I read Seattle's, what they recently did? Caste is a system of rigid social stratification characterized by hereditary status, endogamy, and social barriers sanctioned by custom, law, or religion. Yeah, we have room to think about both. And there was a conversation about not including religion in ours, but.
Yeah, I think just making sure that, no one can say, oh, I wasn't discriminating about caste because I don't think about caste in this way according to this definition or something. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
no, I know, yeah.
Okay.
I think you pointed out something important, and I think that what we have here could be improved. I wanna talk about it with the attorney as well.
And I do think, as the gentleman pointed out, with colorism and anti-blackness at its origin, I think it should be added in.
And under race.
Hmm?
Are you saying it should be added in under race?
To the definition.
To the
Mhm.
to the definition of race?
Not race,
Got it.
not race.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about it.
Mhm.
The other piece that I'm thinking about is also, as you highlighted, Lynn, talking, having these difficult conversations about intra-group discrimination. And in my experience, in high school, we learned a lot about the caste system in my history class, and I think that's because Americans like to think about other cultures discriminating and coming up with discriminatory systems so that we don't feel as bad about all of the injustices that we've perpetuated throughout the years, right? And so when we have these difficult conversations about intra-group discrimination in mixed company, as they say, how do we have those conversations in a way that doesn't demonize members of our community or, make it seem that Asians are uniquely discriminatory or something like that. So just being really mindful as we pursue this very worthy, I think, addition to our NDO. How do we have those conversations in mixed company in a way that is, fulfilling our goals of equity?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, this was really crystallized by colonialism. And India had the second largest population for the slave trade after blacks. So they were a part of a lot of the casteism that has been seen in other South Asian countries because there were so many Indians who shipped as slaves to work like colonial, British sugarcane plantations and whatnot. But no, those are important things, so thank you. So I think next, let's do like a subcommittee and start talking more offline about how we can really make sure this is thorough.
Yeah, excellent.
Not to knock you guys off from this conversation, I'm sorry.
Do you think it would be valuable to have people express their interest in having a work group of some sort? Especially like to get on this group?
Oh, definitely.
I would also be interested in supporting.
Now, is this a Human Rights Commission committee meeting or city council subcommittee? Just,
Yeah, we're still members.
well, I didn't know if
Yeah, because the resolution has to come from the Human Rights Commission.
Right, no, I knew, I just meant
It doesn't have
this
to.
original,
It can, but it's not required.
It can, but we knew that it would be stronger if we shared it all with you tonight, got your input.
It might be useful to have, we've got your addresses, right, your email addresses?
Yeah,
For me?
Yeah, I've been in touch with them.
Correct, yeah.
but now that's what I was asking, and we spoke of concern. about.
Because of Open Meetings Act and limiting.
No, in terms of, having community members in at this phase. That, earlier I was asking the same sort of question, can we have a group with folks that are affected? And,
Yeah, I mean, maybe I confused and I thought you were talking about the listening session.
okay, good. No, this is what I mean when I say listening session, because, we'll do most of the listening,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay,
let's-
great.
Let's talk about it.
Great.
Thanks, Halloween. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll be in touch.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let us go to the other part of our agenda.